Good evening, everyone. We'll be just started across shortly. Give us a couple of minutes before we start across with the presentation itself. We'll allow a few minutes parents to just join us across and more kids to also do the same. And then we will be started on our presentation. You can see the core conversation today would be revolving around a digital SAT and how can you really go on and outscore yourself. So for now, I'm just requesting everyone to just be on hold. You could put your cameras off, keep your mics on mute, so we could have the complete focus on the presentation itself. I'll be taking the questions at the end of the session where we have our Q&A session. Jaiwal would also be available to take all of your queries at that time. For meantime, you could use the chat section to drop any questions that may arise during the course of our presentation. We'll be taking all of them, as I've just said, at the end of the session itself, at the end of the presentation. But you could use your chat section to share across all of those questions. And at the same time, you could also use the chat section to drop a couple of questions to us. You could also use the chat section to drop if there are any issues, any technical problems. You could mark any one of us, Kanushri and Rituraj. They are both co-hosting with us. So if there's any point, any issue, you could always drop them a direct message there and they voice it out to us if there's any certain technical difficulties. Meanwhile, I will be waiting another 3 minutes. We will start at 8:05 with the presentation itself. So I just request everyone to get a piece of paper, a pen, get yourself a cup of tea. We'll be started across shortly. Right. So we've got a good amount of audience that have just joined across. So what I would be just doing quickly is before we get started in the next 2 minutes, we can do just a couple of polls, I mean. And within these polls, I just would like to know a little bit about the audience that have joined across. So I'm just launching this first poll. If you could just quickly add which grade are you currently studying in? This is the year of 2025 to 2026, the academic year. And it'll just give me a good understanding about the population participation and which grade the students are largely in. Quick information for Javel as well, that, we have a large population coming in from grade 11 itself. As you would know, this is the crucial year of applications itself. The SAT itself is very crucial as in your case as well. And right, there are also students which are joining us across from grade 10, grade 9, a couple of them from grade 8 as well and below. So there's a wide participation of students that have come across. Now, moving across, and I'm sure this one question would be largely across to students who are 10 and beyond, because it's a very simple question of have you attempted SAT before? So if you've attempted SAT, you could, quickly let me know. I'm largely seeing a population of no's. That's where students are. There are a few kids who have attempted it, but majority of the question is overwhelmingly no. Right, I'm just leaving it on for a couple of more seconds. If more students would just like to reply by that, when have they attempted SAT so far? Yes or no? Right. So that is one. I'm also ending this poll. I'm putting up one which, is the country that you would be interested for undergraduation. So we just, having one more poll after this, and we will be starting with our presentations. Right. So majority of the participation is looking towards USA and followed by UK second. And last poll that I would just like you to answer is which is the majors that majority of the students are largely looking towards. So this is the last poll. If you could just quickly let me know which is the kind of degrees that we are looking for. And majority of the votes seem to move towards engineering, medicine, STEM. So again, STEM, Javel is the focus. So if I tell you about the participation that we have today, and again also for the overall audience to understand how we'll be taking the conversation forward is majority of the kids, around your 10th, around your 11th, and them looking at degrees which are around engineering, around pure sciences, around economics, finance, mathematics. These are all majors which, even you would agree are very SAT driven. So that's the kind of population that has joined us across today. Now we're just starting with the presentation itself. We will be today covering across the digital SAT and what are the different components of it, why is it important, what is the digital framework for it, the SAT framework, how is the scoring done, what are the different SAT sections. Is exactly where Jaiwal will take it over from me, where he will start across with some number crunching. He will give you a view of how a student should be getting a top score, as he himself has, just gotten a really great SAT score through, various different techniques that he has deployed. So I think today is a really good session in this perspective that it is a very applicable, very relevant, and updated advisory on how to tackle SAT because this is a student who has just done it and has just, cracked the code of getting the top SAT score. Now, moving across to the session roadmap, I will just be doing a quick round of introductions. So this is just introducing the timeline today. What will we be doing? As I've said, we'll be discussing about SAT. There will be a plan that Javel will be really discussing across on. And then we'll conclude the session, as we always do, by defining an approach within this topic of SATs and then concluding with the resources that we do share in all of our conversations. So that's the introduction of our session today. Moving on to the next part, which is the organization Let's Unbound. So Let's Unbound began with a focus on skill building, empowering elementary and middle school students with STEM, life skills, and mentorship. Now, as these students really progressed into high school, they started seeking college admissions guidance, and that's when we listened. We evolved our services to seamlessly integrate storytelling through application into our well-established mentoring programs. Now, by combining personalized learning and skill development and the strategic admission support, we guide students right from their early academic years to top global universities. We have impacted more than 1,000 students across 25 countries and have delivered more than 125 hours of expert mentoring. We are proud to have partnered with organizations like Harvard Students Agencies, Arizona State University Prep. That's a quick look at our organization. Moving across to the founders, we have Amol on the left. He's a serial entrepreneur and an education visionary with experiences at Tata Exceed which is India's largest school edtech platform. Amol has helped to scale up school education platforms right across India, where he has impacted more than 250,000 students. On your right, we have Nishant. He's a mentor and educator and really the brains behind many of the learning pathways that we'll also be really discussing today as well and overall within the mentoring programs that our students do go through. With 14 plus years of experience across academy and industry, he has counseled over 1,000 students and has designed curriculum solutions from K-12 to executive MBA programs. He's an alumnus of SPJAN, a top-rated teacher and a proud mentor of change under Atal Innovation Mission, Niti Aayog. Now, on moving on with the introduction, so a quick about me. I have been within the arena of consultancy for the last decade plus. I have worked with organizations as Citibank, Standard Charter within my financial consultants. I started my career with Jaguar Land Rover with an automotive consultancy. Over the last couple of years, I have moved into education consultancy with Crimson Education and Added Education. And now, I also do head the organization within Let's Unbound. So that's a overall view of myself. Now, quickly introducing the person who's really going to be explaining it all today. So he would be putting in his applications next year. He's excelling in maths, physics, computer science. He's achieved a remarkable SAT score of 1580. He has distinguished himself in academic research, internships, competitions, and he is a very, I mean, I would say an avid learner when it comes to the sciences itself. So without further ado, I would like to bring him where he could, really tell about his overall profile because it's not just academic, there's a lot of sports, there's chess that also has come in. He has participated on various levels. So today would be largely a conversation on how does Javel really go across and had gotten that score, what were the techniques he used. So Javel, you could just quickly have a small greet to the whole population and then I'll give it back to you at crunching the numbers. Right.
Yes, good afternoon to all. I'm Jaiwal. I'm
Sure.
currently residing in Dubai and I've achieved a SAT score of 1580. So
Right,
today
Javel.
we'll be breaking down how I got it.
Right. So, Javel, once we get to that stage, I will hand it back over to you. So, for now, we now want to understand one of the first questions. Why are we here today? Because, one point still stays, which, not a lot of not a lot of people do see it that way, is that SAT still matters. It hasn't happened that SAT has gone completely blind. Even in a test optional world, a strong SAT score can be that difference maker. It can unlock you scholarships. It could help you stand out in competitive applications and really shows colleges that you're ready for college level academic rigor. The SAT, originally known as the Scholastic Aptitude Test, was first introduced in 1926. Over the years, it has evolved to better assess students' critical thinking and problem solving skills. Today, the SAT remains widely used in college admissions primary in the United States, but also for a lot of universities globally. And the way SAT has now gone, which we'll be also be discussing today, is that digitalization that has happened over the couple of years. Now, the College Board, the non-profit organization founded in the 1900s, is the organization that administers SAT. Its mission is really to expand access to higher education by providing standardized assessments and resources for students. So it's the same organization that also does your advanced placements. We have various sessions that we've also done just on advanced placements itself. Otherwise, you could access our website and you could access our newsletters as well, where you could get a really good understanding of APs themselves. That is not the conversation across for today. Now, moving on to the next part, which is understanding the digital SAT framework. How does that look? So now that we have an understanding, what SAT is and what its overall, role in college admissions in a very small way, let's now move into a deeper look. What is the digital SAT framework? So the digital SAT has been redesigned to make test taking experience much more streamlined, secure, and focused on skills that really truly matter for college and beyond. So the key aspects of the new SAT format A is that it is at 2 hours 14 minutes, which is shorter than the previous paper-based version. As even before, it still does contain only two sections. You've got maths, which covers algebra. It would cover advanced mathematical concepts, data analysis. So your topics haven't changed there as well. And the other second part is your evidence-based reading and writing, also referred as EBRW, which assesses your comprehension, grammar, reasoning, and analytical skills. The test is now administered online, making it much more efficient and accessible while also improving the security of the overall system. So that is the overall, argument that College Board had put across while making it completely digital. And obviously, COVID, while it hit and had removed that physical access during the years, really accelerated this digitalization of SAT in the right kind of way. Now, one of the most important changes in digital SAT is the shift away from memorization towards real world application of knowledge. So instead of just telling how well students remember formulas or grammar rules, the SAT now evaluates how well they can apply those concepts in different contexts, whether in problem solving, reading comprehension, or logical reasoning. The second very important thing is that the test is also adaptive. Now, that is a very big change that they have done, which means that the difficulty of the questions will adjust based on the students' performances. Now, these updates ensure that SAT is a better reflection of critical thinking and problem solving abilities, skills that are really highly valued by universities and admission offices and eventually, employers once you would be getting into that aspect. Now that I've just given you what is the digital SAT framework, and very important part, we have just let you know that the SAT has now become adaptive. The two sections that existed, that still remains the same. The time has gone down. It has gone down to 2 hours, 14 minutes. But as I was just saying, the biggest change is that SAT exam is now adaptive. Now, so now what happens is that SAT, as I've already said, is now being divided into those two stages, which you've got your reading and writing. So if you see on your screen, you can see that exact same factor. You do have your two sections, but within the two sections, you have two stages. So everyone, let's suppose within maths, will start with the same stage one. So this would include a mix of easy, medium to hard questions. But however, based on your performance on stage one, it would be decided if you would be placed into one of the two different stage versions. So you've got an easier stage two, and then you've got a harder stage two, as if you could just see on the right side of my screen. So if you perform well, you would be going into your harder stage two, which contains mostly medium to hard questions. If you perform on a weaker side on stage one, then you move over to easier stage two, which contains mostly easy and medium questions. So overall, dependent on that performance on stage one, you will be decided which of the versions do you get. Do you get the harder one or do you get the easier one? Now, what does that have an effect on your performance? Students who get placed in hard stage two can achieve a SAT score, within the range of 600 to 800. When you're looking at somewhere between easier stage two, those are those students who would be capped at 600 itself. So if you're looking at any top university and you're looking at a SAT score of 1400 plus, you need to hit a hard stage two at least bare minimum in one of these sections, if not both. So your scoring and your work on your first stage really does help you to increase your score, your overall score range at the end of it. So this adaptive systems helps to create much more accurate and personalized assessment while also making the test shorter, much more efficient. Since students only answer questions which are suited to their skill level, the test feels much more tailored and avoids unnecessary question repetition of, let's say, either very easy or very difficult questions. So the key takeaways is that your performance in stage one is critical. It will determine which stage two that you will be getting. Stage two difficulty affects your final score range. So only students who enter the harder stage can score in that highest range. And finally, the SAT score remains out of 1600 with 800 points, both in your maths and your second, which is the reading and writing. So the key strategy here is to make sure that you come out with the right kind of grades and scores within your stage one. And at the end, how admission officers are now looking across at this is, if a student who is not doing well and he's finding the whole exam too difficult, the previous SAT could only tell that what the student did not know. Now, by dropping the difficulty level specifically for those kids who find mathematics a little bit on that difficult side, you're able to now gauge what does the student actually know, because that can only be done once he answers a couple of questions right, which happens by decreasing the level of difficulty. And at the same time, for all of those students who are looking at STEM based majors, a lot of students today who have joined are those kids. They are those ones that need to hit a good stage one so they can be in harder stage two. Now, I'll be handing it over to Jaiwal, because I've just introduced you to the concept of SAT. So, Jaiwal, if you could share your screen, and then I would just stop mine. And right, so you could take it out from this point onwards, and then you could just deep dive into both of these sections and how one is supposed to take it forward. You are currently on mute.
Yes, I've started sharing my screen now. So now that we know how the adaptive SAT scoring system works, it's time to get into some numbers. So basically, the SAT is scored out of 1600 points. It has two main sections. There's the math section and
Jaiwal,
the
I
reading and
think your
writing.
screen is not shared. I cannot see your screen. Could you just
Oh.
reshare?
Okay.
No issues.
Is it
Right.
there now?
Perfect. We can see you. It's clear.
Okay. So now that we got the basics of SAT, now we can get into the numbers. So the SAT is scored out of 1600 points. It has two main sections, math and reading and writing. Each section has two subsections, module 1 and module 2. The module 2 you get is based on how you perform in module 1, as we already discussed. So now each section has different number of questions. Math has total 44 questions, and they're equally divided between the two modules. Reading has 54 questions in total, and they're also equally divided. Now, first, the algorithm calculates your raw score, which is the number of questions you get correct upon the total number of questions. And then it's converted into a scaled score, which depends to an extent on how the others perform on the test. So now if we just crunch the numbers, reading and writing has 54 questions to be done in 64 minutes. That's 1.2 minutes per question. Math has 70 minutes for 44 questions. That's 1.6 minutes per question. If you take too long on a single difficult question, you risk losing out on other questions which you could have gotten right. So you should try and skip the questions which you find tough and come back to it at the end. So now to provide a rough estimate, if you answer 40 out of 44 math questions correctly, you'll likely get around 750 to 780 in maths. Similarly, if you get around 48 correct out of 54 in reading, you can get something in around 730 to 760 in reading out of 800. So the key learning here is, even if you miss a few hard questions, you may still get a high score. So you have to focus on maintaining accuracy in the medium difficulty questions. So the final takeaway is that the SAT is not just about getting every question right. It's about strategic accuracy and time management. You should prioritize easier and medium difficulty questions to ensure a high accuracy and a high score. And make sure to keep an eye on the clock. It's quite important in this exam. Okay, so here we start to break down the topics under math. Now the first topic in math is algebra. It has around 35% weightage in this exam. So algebra has a few subtopics like linear equations in 1 and 2 variables, linear functions and their properties, systems of two linear equations and their solutions. I'm sorry. Okay.
Go on, Jaiwal.
So as I was saying, algebra has 35% weightage in the SAT. And these subtopics that we see listed here, they're directly taken from the College Board website. So you can actually use these subtopics to filter out the questions on their College Board question bank. So going on, this domain has about 1/3 of the total questions. But most of it is covered in high school maths. So if you're a high schooler taking the exam, it should be all right for you. Now the second subtopic is geometry and trigonometry. It also has around 35% of the weightage, 13 to 15 questions. Now, so the subtopics in the geometry and trigonometry are trigonometry, systems of equations, nonlinear equations, and so on. So this might be one of the tougher topics in the SAT. Many a times you see questions from geometry, which are actually quite difficult compared to the other questions. Same for trigonometry. This is among the tougher part of SAT, and you might have to practice a little bit more than just the typical school level geometry and trigonometry for this. The third domain in math is advanced math. Now this has topics like ratios, rates, percentages, one variable data, two variable data, probability and conditional probability, and inference from sample statistics and margin of error, and evaluating statistical claims. The weightage for this is on the lower side, it's only 15%. 5 to 7 questions. This is comparatively easier when you compare it to the other questions. The ratios questions, for example, are quite simple. They're quite direct. The fourth and final section will be problem solving and data analysis. There are 3 subtopics here under it: area and volume, lines, angles, and triangles, and right angles and trigonometry. This also has 15% weightage, and it's also on the simpler side. It involves direct formula calculation, which you can use. The SAT also provides a formula sheet for math, which is quite useful for this section. It has the formulas for volume for different objects. So the takeaways from this would be that algebra and geometry have the maximum weightage. They account for around 70% of the whole section. So you should focus the most here. Advanced math and problem solving, the rest of the 30%, they are important, but you can focus on them as a secondary priority. And time management is key in math. SAT math isn't really very difficult, but the problem is time management. That's why most of the students don't get full. If given infinite time, everybody could get full, but time management is what separates the people who score the highest from the people who don't. Okay, so here we move on to English. So the first domain in English is craft and structure. Now the English domain, the English modules in general, just test your ability to analyze, interpret, and apply knowledge of the English language. So to summarize that, it basically means that they'll only test very basic skills in English. They won't test any advanced literature or anything. They only test basic things like grammar, craft and structure, information ideas, and so on. So getting on to the first domain, craft and structure. This section just focuses on how words, sentences, and passages are structured. So the key skills tested are words in context, structure and purpose, and cross-text connections. And the weightage for this section is around 28%. The second domain is information and ideas. This domain is all about understanding the key ideas in a passage and analyzing supporting evidence. So here the subtopics are central ideas and details, command of evidence, and inferences. The third domain would be standard English conventions. And the subtopics are boundaries, form, structure, and sense. In other words, this is basically your grammar. They test rules of grammar in the third topic. And the fourth topic, expression of ideas, there is rhetorical synthesis and transitions. This topic is always tested last on each module. On each module, the last 2 to 3 questions will be from this, expression of ideas. And here there's something very important. A strategy is definitely required for reading and writing. For math, you may be able to do it from the first question to the last question and still do fine on the SAT. But for English, you have to have a strategy. For example, you could start with the last 15 questions, last 12 questions. So do grammar first. And then you would go on to rhetorical synthesis, which is the fourth one. Then you should do the vocabulary questions, which typically come first, the first 4 or 5 questions. And then attempt the middle few questions, which you have left. Those are typically the hardest ones. They're related to passages. So to summarize that, you have to have a strategy for reading and writing, whatever works for you, but have some strategy. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the scope of SAT in India. So SAT is typically being an international exam because it's hosted by the College Board of USA. But its impact in India is growing. More than 30 Indian universities now accept SAT for direct admission into UG. So the SAT is actually quite useful in a dual way. First, if you're not sure if you want to apply to India or abroad, the SAT is a thing for you. It can keep both options open. You can apply to US, Singapore, and have Indian backups. The SAT gives you a globally valid score. It helps avoid multiple entrance exams in India, and can help replace other extremely competitive testing formats like JEE. So these are just some of the colleges which accept SAT in India. So they are ISBF, Indian School of Business and Finance, Flame University, Amity University, Ashoka University, Ahmedabad University, Plaksha University, Kriya University, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, and the BITS Pilani. Now we'll move on to your plan, a specific plan for you, a roadmap to your dream university. So firstly, let's discuss the importance of the SAT. So if you want to apply abroad, SAT is required for most colleges. Most colleges mandate standardized tests. And even if they don't, it's a good idea to have it. So over the past few years, many universities adopted test optional policies due to the pandemic, allowing students to apply without SAT or ACT scores. But this trend is now shifting, and we are seeing top universities go back to being test mandatory. So some of the universities that mandated tests again are Harvard, Dartmouth, Purdue, Brown, Yale, and Caltech. Now these are all top institutions, all top 25, I would say. Now they've made it mandatory for candidates to have either an SAT score or an ACT score while applying. For example, Johns Hopkins recently announced that it'll go back to standardized test scores as part of an holistic admissions process. Now, at the same time, we still have schools which still make tests optional. So you don't have to submit an SAT or ACT score with your application if you apply to some universities like Columbia, Princeton, Cornell, Stanford, UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, and University of Chicago. This means that you don't have to submit SAT scores to these institutions, but you still should if it's good, because they can help offset your, if the SAT score is above 1550, it can help offset an imperfect GPA. And it might be still required for scholarships. So why does this SAT still matter? Even in the test optional world, the SAT still remains an important tool for students to demonstrate their academic capability. It helps showcase your skill beyond your GPA. Because over the past few years, GPA inflation has occurred. GPAs are now perfect for way too many students. The SAT can help distinguish you in that area. The SAT can open scholarship opportunities. Many merit-based scholarships are based on the SAT. And it can help strengthen your applications. As I said, it can help offset an imperfect GPA. So the final takeaway is that if you're applying to a school that requires the SAT, your score will be mandatory for the application. If you're applying to a school which is test optional, a strong SAT score can still help you significantly. So strategic SAT preparation is quite important. So let's discuss how you can build a strong SAT study plan and maximize your score potential. So here we have some universities and their percentile SAT scores. So for example, we can see Dartmouth, an Ivy League, and Texas A&M, which is a large public university. So on the left, we have Dartmouth. As we can see, the 25th percentile score is already around 1500, which is quite high. While the 75th percentile hits 1580. Now for extremely competitive schools like Dartmouth, SAT scores are something of a filter. So if you don't meet their SAT requirements, they won't even open your application. Now, if you compare that with the Texas A&M, which is a public university, their SAT range is much lower. It's between 1160 and 1380. If you break down math and reading percentiles further, this shows how different schools can have very different expectations. But in both cases, the higher your score, the better your chances. And if you see, and the section-wise breakdown, majority of the students score between 500 600 in each section. But only a small percentage hit the 700 plus range. So that's why we want you to aim. So as we can see here, the SAT score can be a game changer for your application to any school. So here, as I said, that top schools often use SAT as a filter. So here is your, I guess, filter score for this for certain schools. So firstly, the top 10 schools only accept SAT scores of 1550 plus. So in this school, if you try to apply with a score of 1500, let's say, and you don't have like crazy extracurriculars, then they'll reject you straight away without even giving another thought. Secondly, we have top 20, which have a score of 1500 plus, and it goes on all the way up to top 50. These are general trends, but as a general rule, you would want to aim for a score around this if you want to apply to these schools. Okay, now these are some general steps to achieve your target SAT score. Firstly, you have to set a target. To set a target, you need to pick a university because the target score can depend on the university picked. So you don't have to pick a certain university at the starting. You can just list some schools that you would like to go to. From those schools, you should try and find the 75th percentile scores. That'll be your aim. You can identify the special requirements for those schools. Some schools ask for all the SAT scores that you. So basically, you can take the SAT multiple times. And some schools want to know all the scores that you've got from all the exams. Most schools will just ask for the top score, but some schools like Georgetown ask for all the scores. And then you set the target score. Either average the 75th percentile score or aim for the highest one. Secondly, you assess your current abilities with a diagnostic test. So the diagnostic test is basically the same thing as the SAT. It is a practice test for the SAT. So you can take a practice test on the College Board website. They have multiple free practice tests available. Now they have tests from test 4 to test 10. You can just take test 4 to take a diagnostic for yourself. Then you record your scores, identify the gap. You can check out what questions you got wrong. So after checking those out, you can identify the gap. Maybe try and identify the sections in which you're going wrong. And then last, choose a prep method. Decide whether you want to study on your own or take a prep course, join a group class, whatever works for you. So step 3 is create a prep schedule. Now you have to build a study timeline. Estimate the study time. Plan for at least 2 to 2.5 months of study before your first SAT attempt. This is quite important because while the SAT sort of mirrors your school, it has a lot of concepts which are not covered in your school. So you'll have to learn theory for those. So have at least 2 months of study time before your attempt. Schedule your practice tests. Take at least 3 full-length practice tests before you give the SAT. Ideally, schedule them on weekends to replicate real test conditions. So the SAT happens every Saturday. In other words, it happens only on weekends. Then you have to have a daily study plan. You need to learn the core concepts, which is a theory. You have to practice the questions, maybe from question banks, like the one College Board has. And then you have to master test taking strategies, which is what you'll do when you take the tests on the College Board website. Step 4 is you have to track your progress. A great plan is only effective if you stick to it and make adjustments along the way. Now, what this basically means is that you have to write down your study start date and the official SAT's test date. You have to keep monitoring your progress by tracking your practice test scores over time. And you have to keep refining your schedule based on your weak areas. So like I said, you should identify your weak areas first after giving the tests, and then modify your schedule based on those so that you devote more time to them. For example, if your math score is lagging behind, dedicate more time to maths. Here, there is another thing that we should mention, that some schools accept super scoring. So if you really can't seem to get both sections, math and reading together, if you can't perform great on both together, maybe you should start focusing on one first. So focus on excelling in one first, and then give another attempt in which you'll focus on the other section. Together, you can take the best scores from each section. That's how super scoring works. All schools don't accept it, but most do. And step 5, the last step, is seek additional support. If you feel like everything's not working out and you're not scoring your target scores, then consider joining a comprehensive SAT prep program. For example, Dream Score University. In this program, you get deeper guidance on core concepts, insights into common SAT question patterns, and score maximizing strategies that help you avoid common pitfalls. Basically, they'll help you identify your weaknesses and then help you work on them. So the final takeaway from this section is, firstly, you have to set a target score, which is university based. Then you have to assess your current abilities with a diagnostic test. Create a plan, a clear structured plan that you can follow, and then track your progress continually. And then adjust your schedule based on the weak points that you identify over time. So the SAT is actually not about what you know. It's about how well you prepare. With the right plan and consistent effort, anyone can achieve their target score. Now let's dive into some effective SAT strategies and how exactly you take the exam. So here we have a sample plan for a grade 11 student. So the first attempt would be taken in November 25. Register by October. And the preparation would start from June if you're starting to take the exam in November. Okay. So this is your first attempt. For the first attempt, this is your opportunity to build momentum. Preparation is going to start in June itself. So you should have sufficient time to prepare everything. So you'll register in October and take the test in November. You have to register before a considerable amount of time before the actual exam. So you don't have to excel on the first attempt itself. You can take this SAT multiple times, but you should try to perform your best and treat it as a strong trial run. Ideally aiming for your first target score on the first attempt itself. Now now we can move on to the SAT attempt 2. The date of the exam would be Jan 26. Registration has to end by December 25. And the preparation begins from November. Okay, this is considering that you carried on from the first attempt. Okay, so this is your refinement round. What this basically means is you have to try and build up from the things you learned from the first attempt and try to correct them here. Now, you should know your strengths, improvement areas, etc. So you should start focusing on timing, test stamina, or accuracy, whatever you're lacking. You'll prep in November, register in December, and sit for the exam in January. Most people, statistically, see their biggest jump in scores on the second attempt. The jump can be anywhere from 80 to 150 points on average. That's a considerable jump. You can go straight from 1450 to 1600 on the second attempt. And if you still don't achieve your target score, you can take another attempt, the third attempt. The planning for this would go something like this. The preparation would begin in Jan 25. Registration would happen in Feb 26, and the exam would happen in March 26. This is your final round. You'll start prep again in January. By this point, you should have identified all your weaknesses and should have worked on them enough to actually achieve your target score. Now, why the sample timeline works? It gives you 3 attempts to score your best. Also, it fits in neatly between school exams. It's kind of structured so that it doesn't coincide with another school exam. And it ensures that you're done before grade 12, so that you can shift to boards for grade 12, boards, extracurriculars, etc. So the goal is simple. By the end of grade 11, you're not just prepared, you've achieved your target score already. Okay, now Faraz will take on the our approach section. Faraz, you're muted.
Huh?
Sorry,
Thank you so much.
just give me a second. I'll just mute this one call. So yeah, Jaiwal, you can see my screen properly? Right,
Yes.
you can see my screen. Perfect. Now, thank you for that part. Really interesting, quite good points that you really raised. And one of the most important things that students should be really looking very closely across is to the timeline activities that we are doing, right? And timeline and following them to that dot is very important. We've had a lot of students in the past that they've gotten too close to their application itself, and they haven't put in enough SAT attempts. So just to avoid situations as that, do make sure that you follow your timelines in the right kind of manner. Now, beyond the timelines, we want to just now get into this whole discussion of the approach itself. What is the approach that we take with students? So, whenever we have a kid who's preparing across with SAT, we start with a diagnostic, right? The diagnostic is going to take you through various parts of the SAT exam, in which we'll give you a nice, a complete, comprehensive explanation or understanding of your current standing of SAT itself. I will be showing you this diagnostic a little bit as we move forward. For now, what I'm doing, I'm just dropping you guys the link for the SAT diagnostic on the chat section. So you can just quickly, jump onto your main chat now, and you'll be able to access this link. I've just dropped it there for everyone. So that's where we started across by. And then we move into the personalized study plan, where we will be assessing the whole diagnostic, understanding where your weakness areas are, and then stipulating hours where majority of the help is required. All of the learning that we do is on a one-on-one basis, and we also do hold a lot of exclusive strategy sessions just to give you a quick understanding of what should be your overall strategy across the two section within one SAT and across your three attempts, because you would all know that you can make three SAT attempts and would get a super score at the end. So how to get that best kind of super score, how to spend your time on these various sections, we do hold a lot of exclusive strategy sessions for SAT itself. And at the same time, one of our biggest strengths is the mock test that we do conduct. We give a whole package of 20 of them, where your final test itself feels just like a 21st mock test itself. The most important pillars that we believe within almost any examination always exist. It's under accuracy, it's under speed, and it's under exam strategy and stamina. Even though the exam has gone down from 2.5 hours to 2 hours, 14 minutes, it is still a long paper. And at the same time, because of the high amount of questions, it would really be testing your speed as well. And one of the most important things that I'll say to how go across with these three problematic pillars, if I'll say that way, or your three challenges, the most important thing is to practice and practice as much as possible. And that's one area where I have seen a lot of students occur in the past have not practiced enough, even though the concepts are clear, the understanding over the topics are very clear. It is just the lack of practice that, doesn't allow you to attempt questions worth 1500 or more for you to get that exam. Because if you really talk to any of the mentors, they'll say that majority of the students can get a 1500 if you get the time to answer it on your own luxury. The whole challenge is to do that 1500 worth of questions correctly within that time space of 2 hours 14 minutes, and at the same time it is a long paper. Sitting through the whole thing does require stamina. Now, as I was saying that we do help you with the diagnostic test. I have given you the link on the chat section itself. Once you get the result, the overall would look as such, where we'll give you an understanding over your math section, over your reading and writing section, your overall breakdown with correct questions, incorrect questions, skipped, and also the time that you would have taken across all of these three options. Either you gave a correct one, incorrect one, or just went ahead and skipped the whole question itself. Now, how does the sections itself, the results that they'll be looking at? So we would divide it up into the different parts within the reading and writing and give you a complete analysis in which questions you got it right, incorrect, and obviously, as I've said, the time taken for the same. And the same story repeats again within section two. So while going through our SAT diagnostic, you'll have a very good understanding of your position within that SAT preparation, not just the two sections, but topic by topic. Now, why digital SAT itself? We give a really good amount of personalized attention, as all of our sessions are done one-on-one. And overall, we come across as an option where you can be taking your digital SAT prep to your complete admissions counseling, so that all in one aspect is part of it. And obviously, the digital SAT web portal, which gives you the exact situation or the exact stimulus in which you would be giving your exam paper. Now, this is the same digital program that I was talking to you about, where you would be having 20 mock tests, 60 hours of mock test. Along with that, you'll have 45 hours of contact tutoring, 45 hours of self-learning through practice sheets. So the overall package that we do have is 90 hours of learning and training with 60 hours of mock test. So if you go beyond the digital, let's say beyond our diagnostics and go for the digital SAT lab, that's the kind of program you're looking across for. Right now, this is just quick examples of students who have, gone across and have gotten great kind of scores. So kid who joined us across at an 1190 and went up to a 1340 in 16 days. That's just to show you across a couple of, accomplishments in that way. Another example of a kid who joined us across at 1300 and was able to score at 1540 through various techniques that we used, one of them being the time drill schemes in which you improve your decision making and answer elimination, the efficient use of desmos for maths problem solving as well. And all of these things coming together had helped the student scale that 1500 barrier. Now the resources, as we shared on all of our sessions, beyond the link that I've shared on the chat section, you could also use the QR code on your screen now to just book a session for a SAT diagnostic. And on the other side, this is just a document which I'll also be just sharing across with you in our newsletter section. So if you access to any of these newsletters through this QR code, you would be able to access these newsletters on SAT, on APs, on all different various topics. And as I've always informed, every week we conduct a different kind of course or a different kind of master class in our sessions. So as you've seen this week, we have gone through over the topic when it comes to SAT. Next week, we'll be going into various different topics of admissions itself. So next time when we'll be meeting across, there may be a session that we'll be taking across in terms of the BAI itself. So without further aspects of these part, I'll just show you the last couple of platforms that we do also put information on. The WhatsApp group, our platform on YouTube. You can have an access through those QR codes. And lastly, if you're looking to get a complete counseling session for a SAT score or a SAT attempt, you could use the QR code on your screen now to just register for that. And I'm done with my presentation now.